Hook, have you ever lost something you built with your own hands, only to have the very person who took it end up staring at your success every single day?
The stakes don't lie.
That's exactly what happened to me.
Can't just move the line.
My neighbor Karen thought she
This
could
is
steal my
theft.
lakefront property, my peace, my pride, my home, but fate had other plans. Because now every morning she opens her curtains and sees me sipping coffee on the private pier she tried to take away. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about patience, karma, and learning that sometimes the best payback is simply living better. So grab your drink, sit back, and let me tell you how it all began. I still remember the first day Karen moved in next door. She was all smiles and sugar at first, handing out cookies, pretending to care about the community. Her husband, Mark, was quiet, almost shy, the kind of man who avoided conflict. But Karen, she was the opposite. She loved control. Every word, every gesture from her felt like it was part of some invisible chess game where she always had to win. Back then, I was just happy to finally have some peace. The lakefront cabin had been my dream for years. My late father and I built most of it together. The porch, the pier, the little boathouse that leaned slightly to the left. He always said, "Son, water heals everything." He wasn't wrong. After his passing, the lake became my sanctuary. For months, life was calm. The mornings were golden, mist rising off the lake, loons calling in the distance, and my coffee cup steaming as I planned small repairs. Then Karen started showing her true colors. It began with little things, complaints about my too bright porch lights, about how my dog's barking ruined her morning meditation. I tried to stay kind, diplomatic even, because that's how my dad raised me. But then she saw the pier. You see, my pier extended a good 30 feet into the lake, with a small platform at the end, a perfect spot for fishing or just thinking. Karen didn't have one. Her section of the shoreline was shallow and muddy, and I could see it in her eyes the first time she looked at mine. Jealousy, pure and simple. A few weeks later, I came home from a work trip to find construction tape and wooden stakes on my property. Karen was outside directing a group of workers. "Oh, hi," she called out like nothing was wrong. "We're just putting in a shared dock. I talked to the HOA. They said it'd be fine since it's better for the neighborhood." My heart sank. She'd actually marked out part of my property as hers. When I told her she had no right, she smiled and said, "Well, we'll just let the lawyers sort that out." And that's exactly what she did. She filed a claim saying the property line was drawn incorrectly, that my pier extended into community water space. She even had fake survey documents. For months, I fought it. Meetings, court hearings, sleepless nights. My father's words echoed in my head, "Water heals everything." But how could it, when the very water I loved was being stolen from under me? By the time the court ruled, I'd lost half my lake access. Her manipulation worked. She built her own pier right in front of mine, blocking my view, stealing my sunrise. I can't describe the pain of watching her family sit out there, laughing, drinking, waving at me like I was invisible. Everyone told me to sell, to move on, but something inside me refused. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace and a way to reclaim my father's memory. So, instead of fighting back with lawyers, I fought back with patience and purpose. I started rebuilding, quietly. Every weekend, I'd go down to the shoreline, clean the water, plant flowers, add small solar lights. People noticed. Even the local paper did a small feature on the man restoring the forgotten lakefront. I didn't know it then, but that small act of love would set in motion a turn of events that would leave Karen staring, helpless, at the life she tried to take from me. Because karma, when it comes, doesn't knock. It glides in on still water. The following spring, everything began to change. The lake thawed early that year, the ice cracking and retreating like a curtain lifting on a new act. I'd finished refurbishing my side of the shore, a new walkway lined with smooth stones, a small garden blooming with wildflowers my father used to love. The air felt different, lighter somehow. Even the birds seemed to sing louder. But Karen, she wasn't happy. Her grand shared dock was falling apart. The cheap wood she'd chosen to save money was warping and splitting from the cold. Every time her family walked on it, you could hear the creaks echo across the lake like groans of guilt. Yet she still strutted around as though she owned the entire waterfront, barking orders at her husband and pretending my existence didn't bother her. Until the day the county surveyors arrived. See, after that newspaper article about my restoration project, a local environmental group took interest in the lake. They wanted to assess the health of the shoreline, check for erosion and illegal constructions. I had nothing to worry about. Everything I built was by the book. But Karen? She hadn't pulled half the permits she needed. I was standing on my porch when the officials came by, clipboards in hand. I remember Karen storming down her driveway, her voice already sharp. "This is private property. You can't just—" But they could. And they did. Within an hour they discovered that not only was her pier built past her legal boundary, but it was also damaging the natural reeds along the shoreline, an environmental violation. She turned pale when they mentioned fines and mandatory removal. When she caught sight of me watching from my porch, she glared like I'd orchestrated it all, but I hadn't. Karma simply found its way home. 2 weeks later, construction crews arrived to dismantle her dock. The once proud planks she'd built to block my view were ripped out piece by piece. I could see her from my window, arms crossed, eyes wet with anger and disbelief, as they tore down the monument to her greed. And then something unexpected happened. As her dock disappeared, my pier, my simple, lovingly restored pier, stood shining under the sunlight. Its reflection rippled across the water, calm and unbothered. That evening, as I sat at the end of it with a cup of coffee, I caught her standing in her window, staring. She didn't wave. She didn't smirk. She just watched, quietly, almost thoughtfully. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. Over the next few weeks she avoided me. Her husband, Mark, started walking their dog by the lake again. Sometimes he'd nod in my direction, a silent apology in his eyes. One evening he stopped and said quietly, "She regrets it, you know." Everything. She thought winning meant taking something that wasn't hers. But she lost more than she ever gained. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and handed him a flower from my garden. "Tell her the lake doesn't hold grudges," I said. "It just reflects what we bring to it." That summer, the neighborhood began to change too. Families who once avoided the tension between our houses started visiting again. Kids played near the water. People fished off my pier. Laughter returned to the air. The local council even partnered with me to maintain the lake's ecosystem. And every single morning, when Karen opened her blinds, she saw me. Calm, steady, living the life she tried to steal. Not out of spite, but out of peace. The irony? She couldn't move. The market for lakefront homes had dropped after her violation went public, and her property values sank. She was stuck, facing the very view she'd tried to erase, me sitting at the edge of my pier sometimes, with friends, sometimes alone, always smiling. One day, she finally approached me. I was sanding the railings when I heard her footsteps behind me. "Your pier looks beautiful," she said softly. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It trembled. I shouldn't have... I don't know what I was thinking back then. I looked up, studied her face. She seemed smaller somehow, humbled. "You don't owe me an apology," I said, "but you might owe one to the lake." She smiled weakly. "Maybe I do." That evening, for the first time in years, she walked to her shoreline and dropped a handful of wildflower seeds into the soil. I didn't say a word. I just watched as the water lapped gently at her feet, almost forgiving. And that's when I understood what my father meant all those years ago. Water heals everything. Because in the end, Karen didn't have to lose for me to win. She simply had to face what she'd done long enough to learn from it. Now, when people ask me how I managed to forgive her, I tell them this. Sometimes revenge isn't about fighting back. It's about building something so beautiful, so peaceful, that the people who wronged you have no choice but to face what they lost every single day. And if you ever find yourself staring at the ruins of something someone took from you, remember, don't fight the current, rebuild, wait, the water will carry the truth back to you in time. Because karma always finds its reflection.